All right, commissioners, we'll be live on YouTube here in just 1 second. Okay, we are live on YouTube, you guys.
Ready to start?
Yep.
Okay. Welcome, everyone, to North Logan Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, February 26th. We're glad to see everyone here. We will begin with a pledge by Heather and a prayer by Nan.
Perfect. Please stand. Repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our Heavenly Father, we are grateful for the opportunity we have to be here tonight in this planning commission meeting. We're thankful for this beautiful community in which we live, for the good people that are here, for the people that work hard to make it a good and safe place to live and to raise our families. We pray that we might be able to discuss things in a calm and good way tonight, that we can fairly discuss the issues and that we might be able to know the best things to move forward with to make our city and keep our city a good place. We are grateful for the snow that we've received, for the moisture that we've been getting, and pray that we might have enough to get us through this year. We're thankful for this good place and for the good people in our town, and ask you now to bless us this night and help us to work well together to accomplish good things. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, we do not have an agenda. Marie's sick, so we do have an agenda. We have agenda. Darn,
I'm like,
we didn't have an
oh.
agenda. We can just go home, right?
I have an agenda.
Okay, we need a motion to adopt the agenda for tonight's meeting.
I so move.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, Aaron.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded, moved by Kenny and seconded by Heron. All in favor of the agenda?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Minutes. We don't have minutes to go through tonight. Marie's been sick, so we will catch up on those later. Scott, how about any follow-up on any issues of previous meetings?
Yep, so we've got one item to follow up on, the conditional use permit for the detached accessory dwelling unit that was denied at our last meeting. That applicant has submitted an appeal to our appeal authority, and it has been scheduled for a hearing on March 8th in this room at 1 p.m. You're welcome to sit in. It's open to the public. It's not a public hearing. It's an appeal hearing between the administrative appeals hearing officer and then that applicant. We don't have minutes on this agenda to be approved. Maria is sick, has been sick for a few days, and so we're a little bit behind on that. But as part of an appeal hearing, the minutes are part of the record. So we will likely try to finish those up and email them out via email and have you guys review them and vote via email, or provide any comments for revisions so that those minutes can be approved in time for that appeal to occur. The appeal time period is a little bit sensitive. We have to hold that hearing within 15 to 30 days per code. So we don't really have time to wait until the next meeting to have those minutes approved. So keep an eye open on your email. We'll get those out to you, and we'll just need to get those reviewed and approved via email.
When's the appeal hearing scheduled, did you say?
March 8th at 1 p.m. in this exact room. So that's the only item on the agenda, or from the previous agenda to follow up on.
Okay, great. Thank you, Scott.
Scott, can you just clarify what is being appealed?
So the decision of the land use authority on that item. So you are the land use authority on conditional use permits. The applicant is appealing your decision. Now, our code is pretty specific because we have the decision made through you as the land use authority. The scope of the appeal is just limited to whether or not you acted arbitrarily, capriciously, or illegally. So really, the appeal should only focus on your finding of fact and whether or not that finding was legal based on the code. So it's not a new review. They aren't reviewing it de novo. It is a review of the record to find whether or not those 3 items had been followed by you as the board. So we'll see where it goes. We haven't seen the actual appeal points of argument. Those have to be submitted 5 days prior at latest for the appeals hearing officer to review. So those will be submitted by March 1st. I won't necessarily send those out openly. Those will go to the hearing officer. If you'd like to come to the hearing, you can see what those arguments would be. And then after the hearing, we might be able to discuss them as a learning opportunity as well.
And then the minutes need to be approved by March 2nd, probably. So they're
Yeah, early enough that the record is available for review. Yeah.
And the
Okay.
decision that's being appealed is the detached ADU from the last meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And Scott, what time was that meeting?
1 p.m. in this room on March 8th. Should be a Wednesday. Yep, March 8th.
Okay. So we need to check your email frequently so we can read the minutes, okay?
Yeah, I'll shoot you guys a text message and we'll email those out just so everybody's.
Put it in an email.
Okay. All right, let's move on to our business. Scott, can you tell us about item number 1, please?
Yep. So number 1, this is a topic we've talked about several times now, and we've gone through a couple of iterations. We've had a request from City Council and Mayor that we go ahead and make a recommendation based on the proposal as it exists. I know that there's, some items in there that, some of you may not be, super thrilled about. But we'll have a public hearing, get the public's input on that, and then we'll have discussion. Any other items, thoughts you'd like to get on the record as part of that proposal, and then a vote. Now, obviously, you can vote however you'd like to vote, and we'll make sure that any comments you have are forwarded over to the City Council. So as far as the staff report, there is a more formal staff report that is in the folder for this item. That explains the adjustments. There have not been any additional adjustments since the last time we reviewed it. So those red lines are unchanged, but I'm happy to go back through those if you'd like a refresher. If not, I'm happy to answer any questions you guys might have.
Any questions? Okay. Guess we can go ahead with the public hearing.
Yep.
Ready? All right, let me read you the rules. Before you begin, if any of you want to make a comment, please state your name for the record. Please speak into the microphone so that your comments can be recorded. Please limit your statements to 2 minutes. If you are also speaking on behalf of others, you may ask the chairman for more time. Please phrase your opinions in the forms of statements, not questions. A public hearing is your opportunity to express your opinions to the Planning Commission. It is not a time to ask questions and expect dialogue between yourself and the commission or city staff. Please address your comments to the commission, not to the public. The commission might ask questions about your comments in order for them to better understand you. If you have questions or need to discuss an issue, please meet with the Planning Commission members or the appropriate city staff member before the public hearing where dialogue can take place. You may provide a written statement as your input for a hearing. You may read your entire statement or summarize it. The 2-minute limit applies. You may provide a copy of a written statement to the city recorder. He will make copies for the commission. Written comments, if a copy is provided, become a part of the public record, but are not included in the minutes of the meeting. All right, so we'll open the public hearing on item number 1.
Chair Isaacson, I think we need to have a motion to open that hearing.
Oh, we need to have a motion?
Yep.
We have a motion to start this public hearing on item number 1. A motion
Madam Chairman, I so move.
and a second.
I second.
Okay, it's been moved by Heron and seconded by Heather, was it?
Yep.
We'll begin the public hearing on our recommendation regarding city initiated zoning text amendment to modify zoning allowances for all of that. All right. If anyone would like to make a comment, you can.
My name is Ryan Bybee, and I have a partner here named Trevor, and he's ceded his time to me as well. So I just pushed start, Chairman Isaacson. On my time. Thankful that we could be here to kind of express our concerns. The decisions in front of you are inconsequential, especially to us. Just over a year ago, we purchased a 10-acre piece of property with an intent and a use intent on it, and it confirmed and cleared that intent with city staff, and actually had received a conditional use permit approval, unanimous approval from this commission and from the city council, with no questions or concerns about the use that we had identified, which was storage units and an office warehouse project. We moved forward and designed the project and put it on our plan to develop in year 2022. In September of 2022, this was in December of 2021 is when we received approval for this project. September of 2022, we reached out to Scott and inquired about some possible changes or some possible things that we were considering to change. And we're given an outline of all of the approvals that we had received, the processes that we had gone through, and we began a dialogue over the next 4 months about our project and the things that we were doing to pursue it. Not once in that dialogue were we notified or said, hey, you might consider doing this or that because we're going to nix storage units from the code, or hey, we're planning to do this. I mean, verbal conversations, email conversations, direct conversations about the use that we were doing, and there was never an issue. No, that wouldn't affect your approval. No, that wouldn't affect your approval. On December 2nd of 2021, exactly 12 months after we received our CUP approval, we got an email out of the blue saying, hey, by the way, your project's approved. We're like, how could our project possibly be expired? How could our project possibly be expired? We're pursuing it. We spent thousands and thousands, $30,000 in engineering on our project. We had pursued it with the intent of building it. And that's our position today. We've consulted with our legal counsel, who's assured us that no, the code in North Logan City says that a CUP expires if substantial work has not been accomplished. We spent $30,000 in pursuing substantial work on our project. Substantial work is not a defined term. It does not imply that you have to turn dirt or that you have to build anything. It says that you have to continue to pursue it. And state code is very clear on that as well. It actually favors the applicant in the definition of substantial work. So this is a big deal to us. It's not just a matter of saying, hey, let's nix this use. This is the reason we bought the property. Our property is 600 plus feet off of Main Street. It's not visible from Main Street. It's surrounded by a hardcore industrial use, a junkyard, a trailer sales facility, and an automobile dealership. I would argue, knowing the facilities that we build throughout the Wasatch Front, which are Class A storage facilities, this will look better than anything that surrounds us. It will actually enhance the look of the project. It is troubling to see that a community would attempt to nix an entire use. There's not another community that I'm aware of that's taken storage units completely out of use. Are there places for it? Our opinion is yes. Is there a reason to nix it completely? No. And if there was a location within a city, this is the ideal location. And I would love to show it on the map, but I don't want to use all my time. But I would hope that you would look at it carefully and understand the impact that you're having. There are places to restrict storage units. I'll be the first to admit it. But this project, this location, and given how it went down, feels really wrong and feels super hurtful, and it impacts our families in a major way. And so we would ask you to take this into consideration. We've tried to open a dialogue with staff. We've asked for meetings. We've asked to have the conversation and have not had those opportunities. And I'm surprised seeing where this is at today. The last time we were here a month ago, the conversation was, hey, let's look at how let's dig into this. Let's see where we can maybe find places in the city this could exist. And nothing has changed and no dialogue has happened. And that's frustrating to us as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Also available for questions later.
And can you remind me your name again, please?
Ryan, bye.
Ryan Bybee. Thank you, Mr. Bybee.
You're welcome.
Okay. Anyone else? All righty. Then we will close the public hearing if there's no one else to speak, and we'll open it up to the commission to discuss quickly, because we've discussed this a million times. So let's hear what people have to say. Anybody?
I just wanted to seek clarification from Scott. What we're talking about here is separate from a conditional use permit.
That's correct. This is a text amendment to the ordinance, so it has nothing to do with past approvals, whether or not they had expired or not. This is a text amendment to the code, and the proposal in the red line is partially to remove storage units from the zoning, any zoning classification amongst other amendments.
So I have to say, I understand Mr. Bybee's concerns, but we're really talking about this text amendment, not about their proposal.
Although this has an impact on, yeah.
Yes, it does, and we agree.
I'm curious, I mean, this may be a silly question, but I'm curious where there has been due diligence in moving forward on a project, if they would be allowed to continue with their project, but yet move the rest of these, change off that. And maybe that's a dumb question, but I'm curious as to how that could look.
So we need to be, we need to make sure that we separate two different topics, right? The conditional use approval through this body is one process that happened on this particular applicant over a year ago. This particular proposal is a text amendment to the code. Now, it would affect the ability for storage units in the future to be applied for and approved if we take it out of the code, yes. But whether or not that project had expired is a different topic of concern outside of the purview of this proposal.
And Scott, when you say we're partially removing storage unit from some of the zones, the small multi-unit storage would get fully removed
Correct,
from.
based on the
from
proposal.
every zone. Okay.
And we talked about the large warehouse storage units last time,
Correct.
came up with that. Remember that? Jeff, you look like you want to say something.
Yep, I'd love to.
Okay.
So I've just kind of written down some thoughts, so I'm just going to kind of read through them. So, and my position really hasn't changed from the previous 3 meetings about this. But I do want to go on the record with kind of the summary of all that. So we all know that there's really strong market conditions out there for housing. There's huge amounts of demand and there's not equal amounts of supply. So there's strong market conditions out there. There's an ever increasing demand for small multi-unit storage in these market areas due to the influx of job seekers and, those who tend to rent smaller living spaces. They move around more often, and also the need to support small businesses who need space to store equipment and inventory.
Sorry, you can keep talking, Jeff.
The growth of small multi-unit storage, it is a matter of concern in urban areas because they do provide fewer jobs and they do reduce the amount of land available for uses that may have higher employment rates. However, cities can take proactive approaches such as creating zoning and an environment to allow compatible uses such as small multi-unit storage, some commercial and light manufacturing to try and preserve the balance of mixed uses. There are financial and community benefits that also come with small unit storage, including the generation of property taxes and not having a lot of demand on city services. Since small storage or small unit storage can have large sites, they're able to contribute a significant amount of money to local government. Also, based on the use and land planning, they do not generate excessive traffic like other establishments, such as shopping centers and other uses. On average, only a small percentage of users visit the facility monthly, while others may only go a few times a year. This traffic small unit storage generates tend to occur on weekends, mornings, or evenings when the roads are typically quiet. Small multi-unit storage also have a very minimal impact on water and sewer infrastructure, which is vital when encouraging additional developments in high growth markets. Lastly, as society continues adjusting to the pandemic lifestyle, coupled with the inflation aftermath, the demand for small multi-unit storage is high in growing markets as people relocate or acclimate to their changing life situations. Small multi-unit storage sometimes don't have the best reputation. They are often perceived to be in a dark, seedy area with inadequate or unreliable security. However, this is the furthest thing from the truth in today's newer facilities that are designed with safety and appearance in the forefront of the developers' minds. They are secured by guards, gates, and/or keypads, well lit and regularly cleaned. They can be designed with aesthetically pleasing color palettes and help integrate and complement its surrounding community. They are also quiet places with only a few visitors each day, making it a good neighbor for other businesses or homes nearby. From an engineering standpoint, small multi-unit storage have significantly low impact on utilities. Except for the rare need for fire protection, the water and sewer demands are minimal. There is low usage for electrical and gas. Small unit storage facilities create low traffic generation, low utility impact, and less water and less sewer flows. There are no significant parking needs and environmental municipal impacts. They are good for infill sites, and they are well received by neighborhoods because of their quiet demeanor and generally limited hours of operation. The most important determining factor in placing them is the proper location. A wholesale removal from our community is oversimplistic and not at all trying to preserve a balance of needed mixed uses. Is allowing small unit storage development in all commercial areas the best use of the limited available land? No. Can we take a more balanced approach, such as including small unit storage in light manufacturing and some commercial areas? Yes. Can we take the approach to allow small multi-unit storage 330 feet or 660 feet off of Main Street, like is being proposed for large warehouse type storage? Yes. Short term, I propose that we include small unit storage in the same areas as we're considering for large warehouse type storage, with the same restrictions being proposed, and keep it from critical storefront Main Street type properties, because that isn't the best use of that land. Long term, take the time to identify areas that it makes sense and make modifications or create multi-use zoning for it. There is a significant need for small multi-unit storage, and it does benefit our community if done correctly. Now, after 2 weeks ago, we left this meeting 4 weeks ago, and the commission asked staff to come back with some ideas of where these good locations would be. Last planning commission, Scott said, mayor and city council are demanding a vote. We've had 3 meetings where we've asked staff to come back with proposed locations. All we're hearing is wholesale removal. I don't think it's right. I think we need to do the right thing and consider the right locations to put it in, because it is needed and it benefits our community.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. I did a little field trip a couple of days ago, and within 3 miles of my house, there are over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different storage unit facilities within 3 miles of my house, with over 100,000 units. No, not 100,000. That would be amazing. over 100 units available for storage. In my opinion, and I appreciate Jeff and I appreciate what he said, I look at our community and I look at North Logan. We only have so much space in North Logan. We're locked in on the west. We're locked in on the east by the mountains. We're locked in on the north by Hyde Park. We're locked in on the south by Logan. So we have 2500 North and Main Street. That is our commercial area to grow mainly. I think, in my opinion, with what I've seen, I think there's enough small storage units available, and that's not everything that's out there, just the ones I've drove around within 3-mile radius of my home. I think for our city, it's important to bring in businesses, and yes, Jeff mentioned tax base, right? But it's important, I think, to bring in businesses that have some revenue happening more than just a property tax. Also to bring in jobs into our city that gives jobs to our people that live here. I think with the small storage units, I think with the land we have available, in my opinion, I think it's okay to say, no, we don't want any more storage units because we need the space to make something more profitable for our community as a whole. And that's where I'm coming from. So we've got two differing opinions here. I'm okay with the mayor and the city council saying, let's get this taken care of, because I think we've talked about it a lot.
We just
So
haven't
Kenny,
talked about it substantively.
well,
It's been the same proposal every time.
that's what we've got to
Yeah.
work with
Well,
tonight.
there's 3 other people.
Yeah,
that have
so let's
opinions too.
Can I just get clarification, Jeff? So your suggestion was restore conditional use for small storage units in the same zones with the same conditions as a
Well,
large warehouse
In the
storage.
short term, if we're in a hurry to do something, then I say, yeah, let's put it around, let's keep it off of Main Street. If we need to go 600 feet, that's fine. But let's do something, but there are areas that can do it. So the quick, easy fix is say, okay, we come up with some alternative language for the large. If we
Yeah.
have to do a similar thing and lump it in and keep it off of those prime Main Street commercial areas, that's a great short term, protects the high use areas. But I'm only in agreement with that if we can really take the time and try and do what we've asked to do, and let's consider areas that it should be in.
So part of the amendment that we're considering right now is conditional use for large warehouse storage in the commercial general manufacturing center, or like manufacturing heavy commercial, and then high-tech manufacturing and research, those 3. So that's what you're saying we would restore. So that at least keeps it off of the community commercial off of Main Street. So that's conditional use in those 3 zones
Yeah,
for
which
small
is-
unit storage.
What it is now.
Except that it would still remove it from the, right now,
Well,
it
it
is
would
in the
remove it from, if we
commercial,
went with
the
the,
community commercial.
yeah.
Yeah. I know this is separate from this discussion, but I'm just curious, what is the zone for the conditional use for the applicant that spoke? What is that zone at right now?
General commercial.
Okay.
I would like you to all drive down. Well, no, we need to do this, but if you drive down 2500 North, that's what we have to work with. That's the entrance to our city, 2500 North and Main Street, North Logan, Main Street. That's my concern. I don't think we need to fill it up with small storage units. I think we need to bring something more profitable and better into the city, more job related. And so I think I hate to just keep batting this back and forth. I think it's time for us to make a decision whether we want to
Well-
go with this amendment to nix this or not.
I'd like to hear from the other commissioners.
I would too.
I feel a little torn between the two of you. I can see their purpose in postponing all, not doing any of this, like you're saying down there, Nan. But I also feel it's not sitting right with me to nix it all right now. That's my personal feeling and driving around. I mean, I know when I needed to get a storage unit a couple years ago, we got the very last storage unit right next to my house. Is it a pretty unit? No. And so I can understand why there's concern about aesthetics and yada, yada. But I do feel concerned about nixing this right now. And originally I felt differently, but as we've talked about this further, I feel probably more similarly to Jeff at this time. And maybe keeping it aligned with what we're doing with the large warehouse, but I want it back on the drawing board, in the future I don't want it on Main Street. I do think we need to have those conversations and remove it from certain areas. But at this time, I feel like we can't nix all of it. That's just where I'm at right now with my feeling in the city.
Scott, is the vote right now to either a yay or nay on the current text amendment as proposed, or can we also vote to recommend a third alternative to the city council?
Good question.
You can do something very similar. Yeah, you can say, we have a negative recommendation based on, whoever puts forward a proposal in the form of a motion can say, I move that we do not recommend as currently proposed, and I would suggest an alternative, and you can put that into the record as a suggestion, as part of your recommendation to the city council. But yeah, the idea here is we have a proposal that has been drafted,
Yeah.
whether, we like it or not, weigh its merits and its detractors, and then, make a motion based on your sentiments as it's drafted. But in that, you can also put a lot of dialogue and comment that we can then, convey to the city council. So it's not just black and white, yes or no. That's not the intent. It's let's talk about it. Let's put some ideas out there for their consideration and then forward that onto the legislative body.
I don't feel that we ought to nix the small unit storage. As I look around and I drive around this community, I see these large storage areas. Aesthetically, they're not as pleasing as a small unit storage. Yes, they may bring in more income, but I think there's a need for those in the community. And if Heather said she got the very last one, I think there's probably where we've got more people coming into the community. Very small building lots, they're not going to have a lot of storage unit on their property. They're going to need storage units. So I'm in line to say, yes, we can have some. I don't want it overwhelmed, but I would think that it's to say ban them outright. I'm not comfortable with that.
I know that. Okay, anybody else want to say anything? So what Heather? you
No,
have
I just
something?
saying, how do we move forward with this right now? Because I think there would need to be some language change or proposal.
Well, it sounds to me like most of you say, don't nix this. And that we would want the staff to come back. I don't want the staff to come back anymore. We've had this.
I would like the staff to come back and present something.
Scott thinks
The staff doesn't need to come back and present anything else. We've heard this. Scott, you have something to say?
I want to make sure that it's clear that I recognize you've requested changes. My time is directed on a lot of different projects.
For sure.
And so priorities are basically given down to me from our mayor and city council. There's other things to be done. So as we have looked at this, a couple meetings, we've put together some language, some you guys agree with, some you don't. And that's fine. As part of the planning commission, we're here to weigh the merits of ideas. And if you don't agree with them, that's fine. I think what we need to do, so we don't keep batting this back and forth, is in your recommendation, you can say we would like more specifics, more site-specific analysis. And that's what we would like to see to be more comfortable with the proposal as it's currently drafted. But because we do want to move this forward, a simple motion to say, hey, whoever wants to forward a motion based on your sentiments, you can say, I would recommend to deny this proposal as is currently drafted because of X, Y, and Z concerns. And then whoever wants to second that motion can do so, or whoever wants to try to draft or craft a motion based on your thoughts and feelings. We don't all have to be unanimous, but the proposal is what it is.
Okay.
And that's yes or no to the proposal, and then add on whatever you'd like to add on as far as your recommendation.
Thank you.
Okay,
Je-
Are we-
Jeff, if
are
you,
you, oh, Scott,
If
go
you-
ahead, Kenny.
if you could compose a motion that at least, I like your idea of at least.
I can't tonight. Like, I'm not, like, I want to understand the CC, because basically what we're doing is nixing the CC. And I don't know exactly the impacts of that, so I wouldn't, tonight, I'm not prepared to craft an alternative.
Gotcha, okay.
May
I
I
mean,
ask,
I've got the parcel map here, but yeah, CC's a lot of what's along Main Street, it looks like. So
And
that's
that,
why I
and
like,
that, and then that may be aligned with the intent there. I would be uncomfortable making that proposal having not
yeah,
understood it.
and it looks like that the city center there on Second East between 18th and 22nd is also zone CC.
Is CC all city center?
So no, city center is a different. So
Oh.
GC, general commercial, that's mostly on Main.
What's
Uh,
CC?
City it's community commercial. It's a very unique zone, very little areas in the city are zoned that. It's kind of an older commercial zone. It's not on Main Street or 2500.
Oh,
It just says CC in the code.
oh, you're right.
Is that a prime location for small
You want to
storage?
show us on
I
the,
think the
Yeah.
problem is I'm
So
colorblind, so I
that's
can't
that.
see the colors.
Are you
as I
really?
thought I could on the map,
show us the map up above.
red and green. So yeah, ignore what I said about CC.
for your red green color. one?
Yeah, and of course, they're all shades of red and green on the parcel map, so.
Okay, then walk us through this, Scott. So everybody listen carefully. Walk us through this.
Okay, I'm gonna open up the legend here so you can see the colors and we'll describe it to you, Kenny.
Sounds good.
Okay, so see this hashed red community commercial CC? It is only in a couple locations. It's actually where the city offices are, that locale, and then the old school district parcels. That's community commercial. It's an older zoning classification. There's a few bits and pieces kind of here and there. But what we're looking at is the darker red along Main and 25. So
So that's all GC.
correct. General
Okay.
commercial.
All right.
City center commercial is this lighter red that you see here. That's a CCC zone. It's meant to be a lighter intensity transitional commercial off of Main into the city center area.
And this is Main and 2500 North.
Yeah, so here's your crossroads of Main and 2500 right there.
Okay,
Point of interest, Madam Chairman, can you tell me what your address is on your property?
It's right behind Axtell's. It's Chevy dealer.
Right here.
okay. So what I'm hearing, Scott, is we either make a negative recommendation regarding all of this, or we make or whatever we say, or we make a motion for a negative recommendation regarding the city initiated zoning text amendment, or a positive recommendation, or a negative recommendation asking for,
And just be clear, whoever makes a motion, that is their motion. If it's seconded, then you can vote on that motion. If you don't agree with that motion, you can vote nay, which means you don't agree with that motion. So whoever makes the motion, it could be for, approval, denial, I should say positive, negative recommendation. And then you can add on any, recommendations in your motion. As long as it is seconded by somebody, then you can take a vote. And then that vote is whether or not you agree, so yay, or if you disagree, then nay. And so yeah, on this topic, it's not uncommon to have a split decision, and that's okay. And that's part of how we convey and communicate that this isn't a slam dunk proposal per se, but it conveys a sentiment of the planning commission as it's drafted in its current form.
So, and as I read it here, it says the proposal also adjusts development standards associated with the other things we've talked about.
Yep.
So is anybody ready to make a motion? Yay, nay, yes with this, no with this?
I would like to address some of this stuff. I just, on the fly, I'm having a hard time. I'm uncomfortable trying to craft a motion that pulls the stuff back in for the small unit without, if you let me have till 2 weeks, I'll bring something back, but
And is
I know you
that,
don't want to do that, so.
is that we can't, that's not an option for us, because you said that
You
maybe
can
we could
table it.
propose
I
something
mean,
and put
that
it
is,
together.
that there's always the option to table it, say we're not ready to make a decision. But keep in mind, a non-decision by the planning commission is in itself a recommendation. The planning or the city council, if they want to make any kind of a decision on this, they can sidestep the planning commission and say, look, you've had ample time to look at it. And we haven't had a formal recommendation, so we'll take that as a non-recommendation. So that's a decision you guys can make as a commission.
I don't think we need to ask for any more time. I think the city council doesn't want to hear us say that again. So you either say, we either have a motion, yes, we approve this, no, we don't. That's where we're at.
Clarification, Madam Chairman, is this, if we say yes, then we nix small unit.
As it's written here.
That's right.
Yes,
Okay,
And we're not approving or disapproving. We're just submitting a recommendation to the city
right.
council.
We're not nixing it at all. We're just saying, yes,
It's just
we
a
approve this or we don't approve this recommendation. Okay,
Well, I'll make a motion. And I make a motion that we don't approve this as proposed.
okay, Jeff has made a motion that we don't approve it as proposed. Do we have a second?
Aaron Hoyle seconded.
Okay, so it's been moved by Jeff and seconded by Heron that we don't send a positive recommendation on to the city council as it is proposed here. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Me, do I get to be opposed?
You do.
Me,
You said you can say nay.
okay,
Scott, just a question. Can Nan then submit an alternative motion that would also be voted on, or that's it now?
No.
Okay.
That's what we needed.
Okay.
okay,
We
Let's
never have to
move
bring it
on.
up again.
right. Let's move on to number 2. Scott?
Okay, yeah, switching gears. Let me open up a few files here. So I'll zoom in so those in the audience can see this agenda item. We're talking about some potential amendments to the development standards for the RE5 zone. So we talked about this briefly just to kind of broach the topic last meeting. And then we had some red lines that hopefully you had a second to look at. They're not the easiest to read. Unfortunately, it's not as straightforward as just striking something or adding something into the code. It's requiring some adjustments in one section and some modifications in others to make sure we don't have conflicting language from one section to the next. But let's open this up. You'll notice in the paper that I provided you, if you want to read it on a physical copy instead of trying to follow on the screen, that's available to you. So let me open up the zoning map again, so we can kind of put a little bit more context to this in as far as the area is concerned. Okay, so we're talking just about making modifications to the development standards in our subdivision ordinance for the RE5 zone, which is up on the bench. There's only a handful of parcels that have this classification, and you'll see it here. Unfortunately, it's not differentiated in color, but it is RE5 as opposed to RE1, 1 acre, just a little bit lower on the bench here. As you go north from this boundary, above Meadowlark Lane, this is RE1 as well. So we're talking about modifications that would affect this area of town. Okay. So with that in mind, I'm going to pop into the red lines, and we're going to we're gonna hop around a little bit because if you read it straight through, you'll be a little bit confused, but I'm gonna point out particular sections. And then we'll bounce back to explain why other sections have been modified or are proposed to be modified. Okay, so let's start on the second page. You'll see this is our section 12C as in Charlie -1003. These are our yard and area requirements for lots that are developed in various zoning classifications. And I don't know why this PDF wanted to strike all of our lines, but it did. But if you read it, there's a couple of proposed modifications specific to RE5. And then I made a modification to RE2 so that it follows and tracks with the rest of the methodology. So we do have some agricultural zoning, A10, 2 parcels out west. Those are the only parcels left in A10. So they have the highest standards as far as developability at 250 feet. Once we get into the residential zones, RE1 has a 100-foot width requirement. RE2, it had a 250-foot requirement unless it's part of either a density bonus subdivision or a density determinant subdivision, which is a style of clustering. And if you cluster in that zone, you can have a smaller width. So it's allowed to go down to 100 feet in width instead of 250. That 250 is a little bit out of alignment because currently our code allows for 100 feet at the RE5. It's kind of weird going down in size and acreage to 2 acres instead of 5 and having a larger frontage. So I made that modification just to be consistent with the rest of the zones in its classification. But as part of this proposal, we're looking at adjusting the front setbacks from 50 down to 30. And you'll notice that even in our biggest zones, agricultural zones and our RE1 zone, we're already at 30 feet. So when we look at RE2 and RE5, being at 50 feet it's a little bit strange. It's not unheard of, but it's a little bit out of sync. And to put a little bit more context to this, we're looking at these parcels here. And what we're trying to achieve by reducing some of these standards is to allow for a cluster of potential homes in this area while leaving the rest of the undevelopable area as undeveloped. Right. So as you recall from our last discussion, there's some history on this where this all used to be RE1. And the property owner worked with the city and we actually downzoned them or removed property rights to allow for fewer lots. And there's some history here that I don't have a full understanding of because this was a little while ago. But what I do understand by this is there was unintended consequences by downzoning the property. The property owner had certain expectations. The city understood those and said, yeah, if we change it from RE1 down to RE5, you should still be able to get the number of lots you're hoping to get. We will remove a master planned road that connected from 2350 over to Meadowlark. But we wanted to make sure that this wasn't 1 acre zoning throughout. So when we downzone them to RE5, the unintended consequence was that when we look at the acreage, the code does not allow for the undevelopable areas or the areas in the rights of way to be counted towards your base density. So instead of taking the gross area of your parcel to say, I've got, for example, 10 acres in a 1 acre zone, I should be able to get 10 lots. Once you account for the undevelopable area and roads, then you have to take all that area out for a net calculation before you determine how many lots you have. So
And RE1 lets you do that, but RE5 does not.
it does not. No
Neither.
zoning classification allows you to use the undevelopable area in your density calculation. You have to take it out. And what we're trying to do is be specific to this area RE5 in this text amendment by reducing some of these standards to allow for this this particular piece of property to develop as originally intended, but the unintended consequences are prohibiting from that happening. So it's a way for the city to say, we recognize that there was an unintended consequence. We want to right that wrong, and we want to do it in a way that is strategic, that doesn't impact other zones, but only this specific area. That makes
Can I
sense?
ask a couple of follow-up questions?
Mhm.
When it was rezoned to RE5 and the landowner realized that that was more restrictive than he thought it would be, did he ever try to rezone it back to RE1?
I believe they did, you recall?
Yeah, because it was recently, it was in a year ago.
Mhm.
A year,
Okay.
year and a half, several of us were involved in those discussions.
And what happened?
We ultimately did not. I think we may have even had a public hearing on
I
the
think-
rezone. But
Did we? I
Yeah,
think we did.
I believe that we
Yeah.
did. Because it
Yeah,
came through
because
as
it was a
zone
rezone,
request.
it was a rezone. thing.
There were a lot of concerns with that about precedents and those things, and we ultimately made the decision
To not do it.
So the intent here is not to rezone them back to RE1, it's to make strategic edits to the RE5, which is what they're currently zoned as, to allow for them to develop what was already understood by both the city and this developer, without opening it up to every zoning classification. We want to make sure that this is specific, and since there's so little area zoned in the city for RE5, it's very limited in its scope. Now, I know that some people are concerned about precedent, and I think you're right to have a concern about that, but also keep in mind, we're not obligated to follow precedent. We're not obligated to make a similar change like this to any other zone if we don't think it makes sense. So as simple as I can describe this is we're trying to allow for the acreage on the RE5 to be calculated in a gross manner and not in a net manner. So we would allow them to utilize their undevelopable acreage and the road that would have been reduced from their acreage in their roads and their rights of way, and allow them to calculate based off of gross instead of off of net. That would give them the ability to get about 6 lots, and that's as much as was originally intended. And this is on a 30-acre piece. So that was the intent when we had downzoned them to RE5 from RE1. But the unintended consequence is that that piece of code was not understood, or just wasn't recognized that it would cause this problem. And now that we have zoned them to RE5, and if we do calculate on the net, they would get far fewer lots because a lot of this acreage is very steep. And there's a lot of topography that is undevelopable. So if we required them to take all the undevelopable acreage out of their calculation, they'd be left with a very small amount of lots, and that just wasn't the intent. So the city's trying to right that wrong, but strategically without doing a rezone. Okay. So when we look at this red line, I know there's a lot of adjustments, but the key adjustments that we're making is on this page where we're allowing for a reduced setback. So it helps them get a building pad on these smaller lots that they would be creating in the most developable areas. Okay, so that's one adjustment. If we go further down, we'll skip to page. The bottom of page 9, this is where this next section begins. So this is the development methods in our subdivision ordinance. It describes the 3 different subdivision methods. We have a standard method, which is where we just divide it up by the acre size. We have a density determinant method, which is kind of like an averaging, where the average size of the lots meets the zoning minimum, but some are allowed to be smaller as long as some are larger, and it makes up for the average. So we still have the same number of lots, we just allow them to be clustered a little bit closer together. And then there's also a density bonus where if they set aside open space and they calculate some dedicated open space, they might be able to get a bonus. What we're hoping to utilize is just an adjustment in the density determinant subdivision section that would simply strike the language that requires them to calculate off of the net instead of the gross. So if we look down to the bottom of page 10 and into page 11, you'll see where some of those adjustments are being proposed. Now, when I started looking through all of these sections, when you start reading code carefully, you'll see that it steps all over its toes, and there's sections that are inconsistent, one section to the next. So the majority of what you see here is me finding all sorts of issues, contradictions, and saying, look, this is inconsistent. It's already discussed in another section. We don't want to have 2 sections depicting the exact same thing. Let's have one section. And let's make sure that one section is clear and concise. So the majority of these red lines is attempting to do just that. This first table, for example, all of these standards are already in that first table we looked at. There's no need to have a second table because there's a chance that if you amend one table, you forget to amend the other. So let's just keep it all in one section. Okay. The second table, what you see highlighted here is already inconsistent. This was an existing inconsistency from that first table we looked at. For example, RE5, we read that it was 100 feet in width, and this table is saying 300 feet in width. So it's a direct contradiction. So what I'm saying is we put a sentence in here that says, look at the table back in 12C 10 or 1003. That is the governing table. We don't need to have another one that is inconsistent. Okay, we hop down one more page to page 12, and that's where we're looking at these more surgical adjustments to say in the RE5 zone only, are we saying we calculate the density based off of the gross instead of off of the net? So this paragraph B applies to all other zones. And then specifically paragraph C, this new one says, for subdivisions within the RE5 zone, calculating the base density of a subdivision in the RE5 zone shall follow the methodology listed in subsection B above and table 1 below. However, non-buildable area and area assumed for roads shall be omitted from the calculation. Okay, and I adjusted this table to say we're not pulling out an assumed 10% for roads, and we're saying that the allowed density is 0.2 units per acre, which is in alignment with what we're looking for gross, not net. Okay. That is the proposal in a nutshell. Now there's a lot of other red lines to clean up sections and consolidate, and let's clean it up as much as possible. But do you guys have any questions on the basic premise of what is proposed?
Do you?
Um,
I don't have any.
I don't have any questions, but I
Okay.
did read through it all today and yeah,
It's
I
confusing.
appreciate the cleanup.
Yeah.
Because, if you make one change here, there was three
It's
other
finished.
places you needed to too.
Yeah.
So, no, I thought it was very thorough. And yeah, so I don't have any questions and I can give my 2 cents, I guess. If you guys
Absolutely.
Want the
Yeah.
2 cents right now, but, I think I shared this 2 weeks ago. I've been, of all of the things I've dealt with on the commission, this was always the hardest for me to, get my arms wrapped around and feel comfortable with our decisions.
Doing this?
Yeah,
This
well,
one.
how to fix this. Two parties entered into an agreement.
Yes.
And the unintended consequences, negatively impacted, and it was, no one's trying to make a quick one. It was honest intentions. But even, we had some very emotional discussions about the rezone to RE1. And then I don't know how many private meetings with the developer and trying to come up with solutions. And I always left those meetings like not really liking what I do on the planning commission, because I felt like that there was unintended consequences, but I worried about the bigger thing of changing the zoning. I thought was another decision that would have unintended consequences. And so I don't love the idea of making and curbing things for one incident. And I've always tried to stay with the code and follow the code. I'm very sensitive, and thank you, Alexis, for the email this week. I'm very sensitive to the development up there. And every one of the concerns that you addressed and brought up, those concerns have not gone away. And I will be there to try and work and come up with a solution, but we can't cut corners on those concerns. But I do feel obligated, as an appointee in the city to try and right this unintended consequence. And I support and I'm in favor of trying to get this fixed so that then we can focus on the real problems with that development up there.
And if I can, Commissioner Coleman, I think you're absolutely right. There are a lot of concerns with developing in this area, and what is proposed here in this text amendment does not grant any right to the developer to develop until those concerns have been addressed. If, for example, this were to be passed, this developer still couldn't develop because there's no access. And that's a huge hurdle that they would have to overcome. And that's just one of many, we have studies, we have geology, we have all sorts of issues up there that would have to be reviewed before anything could be developed under this language. So hope that's clear. This is not development, this is not a developer submitted proposal. This is the city moving forward to try to correct this issue. I hope that's clear that this doesn't pave the way for development to start tomorrow. There is a lot that has to happen prior.
So
what
Scott,
we're-
I just maybe a couple thoughts too. And so I drove up there today to take a look at it, and I totally understand the concerns that were brought up by email this week, because yeah, it looks like drainage and geology, there's definitely gonna be issues. So I think we're all in agreement there. But I guess I also think, if I'm a developer and I'm developing on some parcel where 90% of that is labeled undevelopable, then I've got to understand that that's going to reduce the density in my development. That's just how it's going to be. And so yeah, I get a little nervous when we're trying to, and I still don't, even after that description, I still don't think I totally appreciate the history and what wrongs we're trying to right. I appreciate cleaning up the document, but the one challenge of that was reading through it was trying to find out what language was actually a sticky point.
Yeah.
And
don't feel bad about that. I mean, I wrote this several weeks ago, and even today I had to go back through and recollect, well, okay, why was my mind thinking that this was an issue? And it'll come back. And if you want to sit down and hammer out the nuts and bolts, I'm happy to do that with you.
There is
Uh,
in the folder, there is one PDF document that kind of gives it's pretty high level, but it does give the summary.
oh, okay.
So-
I might
There
have
are
missed that.
comments, yeah.
Yeah, so there's some supporting documents. in the
okay,
folder
yeah.
that might be helpful for you too.
And I think what we're doing here is we're just having a discussion and trying to clear up this language for this little section. And
And clean up.
and clean up the code here. And so I think we're all in agreement with that. Are we okay with that? With what's happening here on this item? Trying to clean up the code language?
Do we need a motion on that?
I don't
No,
know.
we
Is-
don't.
I say, yeah, I think
This is work session.
Okay.
Yeah.
When we do eventually change that, that is a legislative action, not an administrative action, right?
Correct. So when we
Okay.
bring it back, we will still need to have a public hearing formally to get public input on it as a formal proposal. It'll then be a recommendation to the city council. So prior to that, we will notice a public hearing, the appropriate noticing will be sent out. And a staff report will be formalized to summarize the formal proposal as it's drafted. So I wanted to get into a little bit more of the weeds. We were very superficial last time we met. This is a little bit more detailed. Happy to talk about anything in the weeds you want to, but the crux of the proposal is to clean up those items and allow for the original property rights on that piece of land to be restored to the property owner. And they would be able to develop under that language when and if they satisfy all the other requirements that are not easy. So
Correct. There's a lot. So
Where in our city code is developable defined?
as far as like the slope
Well, I
calculation,
guess, we're talking about developable and undevelopable land, but how are we defining that and where?
So yeah, it's 30%, and there's other things in there such as riparian areas and, drainage basins. I think there is a definition. We can look at it if you'd like, but I don't think it's not as technical. It requires that studies be done. So you remember, whenever somebody submits a subdivision, there's a list of different studies that would have to be submitted, and we can say, yeah, that study's needed or that study's not needed. And one of them, several of them would be requested in this area to help us understand what is developable based on the soils, the geotechnical analysis, the runoff, the drainage, all those things would be depicted in the studies. And then a final subdivision plat would then depict the developable versus undevelopable based on those more specific studies. So we would actually delineate the acreage that is undevelopable versus developable once we had more specific engineered analysis.
I guess I ask because one of my concerns would be, if we start saying, the determination is the total acreage of the parcel gross less any non-buildable area. If the definition of non-buildable area changes at some point down the road, then an unintended consequence may be that we've changed what RE5 looks like.
Yeah, if we were to say the whole hillside is developable, that would be true. So if we were to say, yeah, you can build over 30%, you can build in the middle of drainage basins, then yeah, if the definition changes, they would be able to use that as all developable land. But because we're not changing it back to RE1, we're leaving it as RE5, they can still only get 6 to 7 lots out of that whole area. So if that's a concern, based on the 30 acres that we're talking about on that one owner's land, and there's a couple more owners that this
To the
is
north of that.
affecting. But if we're looking at it with this particular piece of land, they're still limited to 6, instead of 30 lots or 25 if they were to be able to put roads in and all that. If the definition of undevelopable were to be changed. So there's that little bit of protection. We're not upzoning them. We're keeping them the same zone as far as the quantity of lots. It's just allowing them to put them in a particular location that's easier developed. That makes sense.
Mhm. Sweet. Need any more discussion on that? Folks? Okay. All right. Any more? Heather, you have a question?
I'm just,
All
I
right.
don't know how they would do that.
So I think we all think it's a good idea to work on clearing this up.
Okay, yeah, we'll put it back on a future agenda with the staff report and we'll notice for a public hearing and we'll get your final input on it.
Okay.
If any of you guys, as you read through this, I know it's technical, I want to sit down and help really wrap your brain around it. I'm totally happy to do that. So just let me know.
Okay.
Thanks, Scott.
Item number 3, Scott.
Okay, we have a little bit of time, so that's good. The last item on the agenda is more specific to accessing future development. So let me pull up some information here. Okay, now I didn't provide any of these documents to you in advance. I didn't expect you to review them. We're just going to have an initial discussion on this and we can talk more about it as we get more detailed red lines put together. But the first thing I wanted to show you. Now let's do this. I went through the code and I compiled all of the language that we have through the various sections that governs access to future subdivisions. Okay, I'm gonna zoom out and then we'll zoom in so you can read it a little bit better. Okay, so section 12D is our subdivision ordinance, and then within the subdivision ordinance, there's various sections that govern both residential and commercial subdivisions. You know, taking raw land, dividing it up, preparing it for development. Right now, under the improvements required, when somebody is looking to develop, there's a basic list of things they have to have. Obviously, you have to have culinary water, sewer, stormwater, streets that provide access, street lighting, sidewalks. So the things that I highlighted in here are access specific. So anybody who's developing, these are just very basic requirements for subdivision to be considered. Okay, so if we hop down a little bit more, when we look at the development regulations specific to subdivisions, we talk about when they apply, they need to show us various things for us to review, to toss around, you know, whether or not it complies. One of these is when they submit for a concept plan and also for their preliminary plat, we want to understand the effect that the proposal has on the lands within the development, and then also its relationship to the areas adjacent to. So we want to understand how it affects vegetation, the gateways to the city, the trails, a couple other things in here. But if we're looking specifically at access, we want to understand how the development interacts with public trails and corridors, both planned and existing, the effect of the development on adjacent pieces of property, existing trails adjacent and through. So high level, what these are saying is we want to understand the context of the development based on where it's located and how it interacts with its surrounding. When we go a little bit further down, one of the studies is a traffic report. This is one thing that we can require if we feel like it's necessary. A traffic report would look at the proposed roadway, the type of land uses that are proposed, how many trips are generated, and if there's any conflicts that need adjustments in its design to accommodate the capacity. Okay, we don't require a traffic report on basic subdivisions, but we would on commercial type of developments, for example. Okay, that's one of the studies that's required. When we look at, let me go back up. So this section, just so you have context. These are all development regulations. Okay, so we talked about, so this is A, B is the studies. C is these non-buildable areas. This is going back to Kenny's question. So steep slopes, soils that are very limited in their rating, natural drainage corridors, et cetera. But then we're looking at streets. So layout of streets shall conform to sound engineering practices. And then it goes on to give us some standards for slope. The standard being 8%. We can go up to 10% over short periods if need be. But it's not the standard. That's the only standard that's listed here is slope. We talk about trails and how the trails should be developed, basic standards that they need to follow. The one thing in here, it does indicate location in this section for trails. So look, the trail location, sizes, and standards shall be in accordance with the city's general plan. This is the first piece of language that we run into the question of where are these things required? Everything else is more contextual. That everything we've read all the way till this point is more, how does it fit in? What's your proposal? But it does nothing until this section does it tell us where should these things be. So right now, this section for trails specifically is saying that it needs to follow the general plan. And we have a general plan exhibit that shows the trails that are planned for the city. So if anybody wants to develop within one of those trail areas that has already been identified in the master plan, then we could say that trail needs to go in where it's depicted on the plan. Okay, and then this section is where the rubber really hits the road as far as vehicular access, road rights of way into and out of a subdivision. So this is what we call the Wildercrest rule. It was put in after the Wildercrest subdivision that basically is an isolated landlocked appendage that isn't connected to anything, right? So we learned our lesson. We said these guys are way far out. They're not interconnected to anything. There's some safety concerns. And basically in a nutshell, it says 700 feet, 750 feet is the maximum length of a terminal street. Right, so any subdivision, if you have a single point of access, it can only be up to, but not to exceed 750 feet. And on that 750 feet, you can only have 30 homes, right? After that, you need to have a secondary point of egress. And if you don't, then that's your maximum. You're just kind of stuck until, you're able to really put in quite a big push to extend that road to where it can connect back into the greater connectivity, regional connectivity system. Are you guys familiar with this language? I think you guys looked at this about a year ago. It's been somewhat problematic. I wasn't here for all of that, so I kind of came in and now I understand. It is problematic. It was kind of put in as a Band-Aid to address, hey, this is a safety concern, with the intent that we'd come back with maybe some better ideas as to how do we allow for development to occur in a safe, organized manner, right? So this is the access section for the subdivision ordinance, and it kind of goes through, it does have some exceptions to say you might be able to have more, but only when and if you have that secondary point of egress. Okay, so I'm going to just skip down through this next section about the concept plan. The concept plan phase is the very first phase of a subdivision application, and that's where we really start to see the general layout of a development. Where are the roads? But the language in here doesn't provide any standards. It just says, show us how you'd like to develop, show us your proposal for streets, and show it in a clear way that we can see what you're proposing. It doesn't give any standards for how and where things are going to be. Okay, so I just wanted to just blow through. That's the existing language. That's all we've got. That's what we have to work with. Okay. Let's go to our map here. Now, there's several instances here that this language came about because of this landlocked, what would we call it? It's not an archipelago.
Peninsula.
Peninsula, there we go.
Well, that's, I mentioned I just drove up there today. I
Yep.
thought, oh, it's right off 2,500 north. I'll just go up 2,500 north. No,
Can't.
yeah,
Yeah, the map makes it look like you can. It looks like there's a street, but it is substandard the whole way. It's barely, I think it's chip seal on top of clay, if I'm not mistaken. And it's not a public street. It's not a master plan street.
yeah. Above the cemetery, there's about 200 feet of road that's just not.
It wasn't
paved or
intended to
not-
connect.
It's not road.
Yeah, okay, right. So, yeah.
Let's not even talk about that.
It's
Okay,
private lane.
all right.
That is a rural road and it ends at the cemetery.
With a chain link.
Yes,
Yeah.
I may have driven up to that before.
Yes.
Hoping to
let's
get.
continue on.
I'm glad you guys are well versed in this. That's good that you have some context. So just so you guys know, 2300 is the master plan road that will make this connection. And as you guys know, Canyon Gates, which is this first phase of a subdivision, it actually involves all of this land up here. And this is a multi-phase subdivision. 7 phases, I believe, that will help to make this connection happen. So we were able to approve that in the past, knowing that this connection would be made, this master plan road would be installed, and all is hunky dory. This first phase is all that's been platted and developed so far. And if you actually take a measuring tape, it's I think it's like 1,300 feet. This is pre-Wildercrest rule language. Okay, so that's basically a block. 1,320 feet, that is a standard block. 2 blocks, yeah, 660, 1,320, 2 blocks. So here we've got an example of how a multi-phase subdivision will eventually connect a master planned road, but they are stuck until that road is basically connected. So there's other examples of this further up. So for example, Foothill Drive, it's kind of stuck because 750 feet, we can't go any further. There's no connection anywhere. So that kind of landlocks some of this internal area. How do we develop this when the ownership is fragmented and, we don't have the ability with a larger development to connect it, even though it's a master planned road, we know that it's going to connect at some point, but the Wildercrest rule somewhat prohibits us from doing that. There's a couple other examples, but I think you guys understand the limitation when we look at trying to connect some of these internal blocks with roadways that just are not able to get to the other side with future development. Okay. Looking at our transportation master plan. So this is an exhibit in the general plan, and it's actually been updated since the general plan went through, but this road right here is actually no longer. This is the road that was removed as part of that down zoning that was done to change from RE1 to RE5. So we're no longer wanting this road just because of the engineering challenges and the extreme cost of ongoing maintenance. It's extremely challenging. So other than this road, I believe this is up to date as far as our master plan road connectivity. And you'll see here's your 2300 connection that we were talking about just a second ago, where Canyon Gates will eventually be able to connect through. But there's also, some issues. We talked about this, what is this, Foothill Drive? When you look at the map, this connection is frustrated by the ability of, that 750 foot rule. How do we get this to connect through? And we're limiting each development to that 750. So a couple of things I've kind of been looking at is some potential areas for improvements. And when you get a minute, take a second to review this language. But we're not the first ones to approach this concern. We don't have to be the first ones to invent this wheel. I was lucky enough to work in Weber County, and they've spent the last 3 years talking about this as well. And they have gone through a lot of discussion with their fire marshal, a lot of discussion to make sure they're meeting fire code. And they have recently approved an ordinance that addresses this exact concern. How do we allow for these roads to connect safely and efficiently based on our master planning? And so that's something I'd like to bring before you guys for consideration. It basically allows for a longer connection beyond 750 feet if it is on the same path as a master plan road, but it meets all the fire safety standards for a fire access road. So I think what maybe you guys had talked about is this 750 is the cap for fire. Is that correct?
That's what I was just gonna ask you.
Okay, so I actually read the fire code today. And luckily, out of the 640 pages, the access road is only 3 or 4. So
Yeah.
it's not terribly difficult. I actually took, so if you have a minute to read this, I basically summarized it. I said, here's the code in a nutshell. And so you can read through this, and I'm happy to do that now, or you guys can read a little bit more as well. But here is the only reference. There's a table in the appendix where that 750 number actually appears. And this is just a requirement for dead end fire access roads. It basically says for any road 0 to 150 feet in length, the road has to be a minimum of 20 feet wide, but you don't have to have a turnaround. It's reasonable to assume that you can back up on a road that's 150 feet. Once you get between 150 and 500, the road can still be 20 feet wide, but then you do have to have a very specific turnaround. That could be a hammerhead. There's a Y design or a cul-de-sac with a certain turning radius. But after 500 feet, between 500 and 750, the road has to be widened to 26 feet in width. You still have to have that turnaround, but it's allowed to be a dead end. Over 750 feet, that's just where the code doesn't have a standard for width and turnaround. It doesn't say it can't be longer than 750 feet. It just says that special approval is required, which defers to our local fire authority or fire marshal. So the way that Weber County addressed this is they said, if you want to build along the same road route of a master plan road, you may exceed 750 as long as it shortens the distance to connect back into the planned interconnectivity of the public street network. But when you get to that length, that distance, you're still capped at the number of homes you can have on that length. So it says 30 is the number. But there's an exception. If you want to build more than 30, you can, but they have to be sprinklered, right? So it gets extremely expensive, and most people don't want to put, $30,000 to $40,000 sprinkler system in a home. But you can. The code doesn't say thou shalt not under any circumstances. It also says that if you have a secondary point of egress, then it doesn't matter. Then you're good. So we have some good example language that has been extremely vetted from a local jurisdiction that I'm familiar with that has good language that I feel like we can work with and try to get these inner blocks connected instead of leaving them just marooned until a better idea comes along, or someone's able to buy up enough land to master plan and make those connections happen. So the proposal would be we come back with some language, a formal text amendment that would allow for some of these ideas to go into effect. Now, there's a couple other things I think if we're going to address connectivity and road access that we may want to look into. So for example, like I had mentioned, our code doesn't really tell you where. I mean, it says you do have to put in a master planned road if you're along a master planned road, but everything in between, it's kind of open-ended. So we have a lot of acreage in between these master planned roads where there's not a lot of direction. Like for example, this block, if anybody along this road wants to develop, they have to put in that road. But there's not a lot of direction as to how they connect for inner block development. So there's some standards we can have that basically are good neighbor standards to say when you want to develop your property, you can't just leave your adjacent neighbor high and dry and landlocked. You do need to connect through for orderly development. And there's a couple other things that I think we can improve. Some half street standards. You see this in Hyde Park. I don't know if Public Works loves the idea. Right now, half streets are a no-no.
Our half street is a little bit. That was more in line with the fire code. Their half street is true half street. Ours, if you were the first to develop in that, go to at least 26 feet of asphalt each fire. So in some subdivisions, they'll be more feet than the other person on each side of the road. Just so you can have.
But you're able to develop and just instead of us just saying no. But then the next adjacent property owner would have to complete the street when and if they develop.
So a half street is just anything less than 26 feet.
26 feet of asphalt with the curb and the sidewalk, so you do all that on your side.
Okay.
Yep.
Whereas the midpoint of the regular road is about 36 feet, 7 feet of asphalt.
Yeah.
So that's really good.
Now, this might be more than we want to bite off and chew right now. I think the biggest thing we want to address is how do we connect these inner blocks? And we'll start there, but these are other ideas we may want to incorporate as we're making adjustments to our accessibility and our standards for development. Public versus private streets. I don't know if you guys have ever had that discussion before. There may be some areas in town where private might make sense, where we don't want to maintain in perpetuity. Let's see. We talked about the terminal streets. Another idea that I wanted to kind of bring up with you is what is called a connectivity incentivized subdivision. And basically what it is, right now we have 3 subdivision types. We have the standard, we have the density determinant, and we have the bonus density, right? This is another subdivision tool I've seen employed in other jurisdictions that basically allows for a little bit of an incentive to the developer in the form of additional density if they make exceptional connections above and beyond what they're already required to do. So if they voluntarily put in a trail, we would say, okay, we won't deduct that acreage from your density calculation. You know, it's a win-win. The developer gets something, you know, the city and the community get something. So it's something I think we should look at because it opens up some flexibility. It provides an amenity and better interconnectivity without, you know, having to pull teeth. So that's something we can easily inject into our subdivision ordinance if we think it's a good idea. Obviously you don't want to give away the farm and say, yeah, you have 20 extra lots on this 5 acres just because you put in a trail, but there would be, you know, bounds and limits that it would have. So the idea here is we want to start talking about this. We'll come back with a formal text amendment that would put these ideas onto paper. Maybe not all of them right now because it's a lot to take in. Maybe we start with that terminal streets idea. And then maybe we come and we address some of these. But we can, if you guys think some of these are long overdue and we want to just go ahead and throw it in, we have some good language to use if we want to.
I think starting with the terminal streets is a good idea and then go from there.
Yeah.
That's,
I like
any other
Okay.
comments?
We've had a lot of discussion about those.
Yes, I think that's a good start.
Okay, we'll start there. I know it's a lot to try to inject all at once, so we'll start with the terminal street section, and then as time permits, maybe we'll start ticking off some of those other improvements.
So don't plan on any short planning commission meetings in the near future, it sounds like.
No, it'll be fun.
Okay,
Okay,
well, that's all I had on that as far as work session today. We'll get into the weeds a little bit later.
great. Thank you. Any other staff business or discussion?
Yeah, I wanted to give you guys a heads up. The state of Utah did send us a notice of compliance on our moderate income housing plan. So we are in the state's good graces.
Nice.
There is some language being floated at the legislature right now that is interesting. There is a proposal to fine cities up to $250 a day if they're ever found in non-compliance with their moderate income housing plan, whether our execution or our reporting. So
No
that's
more carrots. They pulled out the sticks.
no more carrots. Yeah, now we're looking at penalties. So it's been interesting over the last 4 or 5 years to see this iteration. Initially it was maybe put a plan together. It's like, okay, now you have to put a plan together. Okay, now your plan has to have very specific requirements. Okay, now if you don't have that plan and those requirements, you don't get funding. Okay, now not only do you not get funding, but you're going to get fined. So
Mhm.
that's kind of the iteration we've gone through to this point, if this language goes forward. But for the moment, we are compliant, and that's nice to be in that, I guess, good graces. We have some things we'll work on this year,
Good job.
and we'll see where it goes.
Unless
I just want to give you a heads up that that's where we're at on that.
Thank you.
Thank you for all your work on that, Scott.
Yes.
That was.
It's a fun topic, I know.
Great. Hey,
Scott,
that's it?
can I just ask about one more item of business?
Yeah, you're right. It's in May. April.
Sorry. Utah League.
Can you speak into the mic, Alan? State your name.
That's usually something that. This is really Scott's.
No,
That's something that's some of the. kind of things we-
it's a training opportunity. It's a couple days, work sessions and whatnot on various topics if you'd like to go. It is, St. George over a couple of days. So obviously there's some time and some effort to get down there. But if you'd like to go, let us know. We do have some budget to accommodate those who would like to attend.
And it's April when?
It would actually be the class is actually just the 20th and then half day on the 21st.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the 19th, they just have a. It's actually just the 2 days.
So you drive down on the 19th, stay over into the 20th and the 21st and drive home the afternoon of the 21st.
You can go down there and party, right?
Aaron's gonna
Alright.
party.
That's what I'm
St.
thinking.
George.
And anything else?
Scott, I was gonna ask you the Utah Land Institute training next week on the 22nd.
Yep.
I registered for that. Hoping that they would send me like a Zoom link or something for that. I don't necessarily want to go.
There is a Zoom option. I don't know that they've sent out the link yet, but
Okay.
if I find it or if I see it, I'll pass it along. I'm pretty sure it was intended to be a hybrid option.
Well, I noticed that they said they cap in-person attendance at some small number.
I did
So-
not hear that. It's at the
Yeah.
fairgrounds multipurpose. So it's a pretty big venue. but
Oh, is it? Okay. All right.
just show up. I don't think they're gonna tell you to go away.
Okay.
Are you wanting?
Did they? tell
Well,
you
I guess I'd prefer to just Zoom it if,
if possible.
If
So we can
possible,
charge this
but-
time to the Air Force or NASA.
yeah, that's right.
But yeah.
All right.
So
Thank you. Thank you,
Continuing
Jeff.
Education.
glad this
That's
is all a
not
matter of
your
public
fault.
record here.
Look, record.
Oh, it's
You're-
between us.
We're not.
Any
charging
other
NASA.
questions? Committee, whatever we are, commissioners.
So Scott, you had created a little meeting notice placeholder for us. I noticed that there was
Yeah.
like a Google Meets or whatever they call it. Is
Yeah.
that, that's not the,
No, and the reason being is
okay.
every time we send out I didn't hit the X button to say that there wasn't, but not on
okay.
Google Meets. I think it
So
will
that's
be
not
via
it.
Zoom. When I
Okay.
know if there's a digital link, I will send it out.
Okay,
But it's free to register. Anybody that wants to register, feel free to. It will count towards your training. So.
Okay. so
shoot
we
that
have to
out.
register for it. We can't just say, yeah, we got your thing and we might go.
I mean, I'll
we might
circulate,
listen.
the link regardless, but I think they'd like to know who's in attendance.
Clean your
Okay.
house. while
Yeah.
you-
All
And
right,
if you do attend, let me know and I'll mark you down for that time so you can count towards your training.
okay, great.
Yep.
Any other questions? Okay, we need a motion to adjourn.
Madam Chairman, I so move.
Second.
All right, Aaron's motion to adjourn, Jeff seconded, all in favor?
Hi.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you.
Kenny's thinking about it.
Thank you, everyone.
I was thinking about opposing.
Nice job.